How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls across America, it's Eric Erickson. Thanks for being here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, would be delighted to have you. I'm going to start very, very hyper local because this involves my neighborhood. There's a special election in my area, and I bring this up because I'm on the radio here in my town. In fact, I'm on in delay, and I was in the grocery store the other day, and it happened yet again. Someone came in, and I was standing there like, "What are you doing here? I just listened to you. I was listening to you on the radio." It's shows in delay. So when you're listening to this at just after 3:06 p.m. today on WMAC in Macon, you need to know there's an election and the Democrats have an opportunity to win it because Republicans haven't been showing up. It's kind of crazy. This is a story that keeps cropping up nationwide where the Democrats are showing up in elections in Republican districts and winning the Republican districts because the Republicans aren't showing up. The Republicans aren't having a ground game. In my area, there's the far left party, the Working Families Party. They literally rented 15 passenger vans. We're going into the black community and driving black voters to the polls in this heavily Republican district. And the Democrats have outpaced Republicans in early voting in a district that should be overwhelmingly Republican. This has happened now like 3 times in Georgia where the Democrats have picked up seats in special elections or come close to winning in special elections in seats that are dominated, like 60% Republican because the Republicans aren't showing up. So warning sign for Republicans come November as well. There's some more data on the midterm elections and how the enthusiasm is completely with the Democrats. So if you live in Upson County, Crawford County, Peach County, Houston County, Bibb County, Monroe County, go show up and vote today. I'm voting for Steve McNeil. I live in this district. My guy, Stephen McNeil. The guy who's number one on the ballot, by the way, is the far left radical that the Working Families Party is trying to get elected. So the very first guy on the ballot, the first name on a ballot always gets 1 to 2% bump in the vote just because of the first one on the ballot. People just check the box and move on. So the very first guy is a far left progressive that the near communist, if not real communist, Working Families Party thinks they can get elected because Republicans haven't been showing up. So Middle Georgia, please save us from the communists. Go vote for Steve McNeil this afternoon. All right, I got to get into Minnesota. You're asking, but Erickson, isn't Greenland a bigger story? I'm going to be very clear, candid, and honest. When the President of the United States decides to blow up NATO, go to war with our allies, and try to invade Greenland, which hasn't happened yet, but who knows, given his insane text message of the weekend, Greenland is a much bigger story than Minnesota. And that is unfortunate for the Republicans, because if the Republicans had a president who actually cared about getting Republicans elected, the president would keep his mouth shut on Greenland and let the Democrats continue to overplay their hand in Minnesota. I'm just beating my head against the wall at the insanity of the president's text message to the Prime Minister of Norway, saying in part he's coming after Greenland because Norway didn't give him the Nobel Peace Prize. This was not AI. This was not a hack. The president acknowledges it was his text message and proceeded to leak one from Emmanuel Macron today. When the Prime Minister of Norway is beside himself dealing with the president, he feels compelled to send the New York Times his text exchange so everyone can see what he's dealing with. Houston, we have a problem. The President of the United States wants to conquer Greenland because Norway did not give him the Nobel Peace Prize. That's not me making it up. That's the president's text message to the Norwegian Prime Minister in part. That's insane. It is insane. We went from a dementia patient to a guy who's insane about Greenland. Of all places, Greenland. Look, I get the strategic importance. I even agree with the president. But it's the way he's handling it is absolutely insane. When we should be focusing on Minnesota, why? Because the Attorney General of Minnesota is a man named Keith Ellison, who is a far-left progressive, who is now defending the right of protesters to invade a Christian church on Sunday to interrupt their worship and drive them from the church. This is the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, of Minnesota, justifying the ICE protesters storming into this church.
The protest is fundamental to American society. This country started in a protest, and it's freedom of expression. People have a right to lift up their voices and make their peace, and none of us are immune from the voice of the public. So, quite honestly, I think that you got the First Amendment, freedom of religion, and the First Amendment, freedom of expression, and I think that it's just something you gotta live with in a society.
He fades out there. Okay. This is my frustration with the Greenland story. This should be a huge deal. The president distracting everyone with Greenland distracts from the Attorney General of Minnesota, a far-left progressive Muslim, being fine with anti-ICE protesters invading a church. That should actually be the big story. That should be what we're talking about, but we can't because the president's gone insane about Greenland. But this is also insane. To have the left justifying this, listen, it's not just that. I mean, the guy's an idiot. The FACE Act was originally drafted to punish people who blocked access to abortion clinics. It was amended, the FACE Act was, to specifically include protecting worshipers in worship services. There's actually the second section of the FACE Act. It's easy to read. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand it. Anyone who interferes with the free exercise of another person's worship is violating the FACE Act, and this is Keith Ellison talking to Don Lemon and D.L. Hewley.
And the FACE Act, by the way, is designed to protect the rights of people seeking their reproductive rights to be protected, and so that people, for a religious reason, cannot just use religion to break into women's reproductive health centers, right? So how they are stretching either of these laws to apply to people who protested in a church over the behavior or the perceived behavior of a religious leader is beyond me.
It's not a stretch of the FACE Act. It's the actual plain language of the FACE Act. It's wild that the Attorney General of Minnesota not only does not realize that the FACE Act applies, but he's justifying this. The FACE Act was introduced by Ted Kennedy. And the FACE Act was amended. And the amendment to the FACE Act now prohibits interference with people's right of worship. This is Section 1 of the FACE Act. I'm going to read you the FACE Act. You're not a lawyer, I realize. But let me read you the FACE Act and see if you can understand it. This is Section 1. Whoever by force or threat of force or by physical obstruction intentionally injures, intimidates, or interferes with or attempts to injure, intimidate, or interfere with any person because that person is or has been or in order to intimidate such person or any other person or class of person from obtaining or providing reproductive health services shall be subject to the penalties of this law. Here's the second section. Whoever by force or threat of force or by physical obstruction intentionally injures, intimidates, or interferes with, or attempts to injure, interfere with, or intimidate any person lawfully exercising or seeking to exercise the First Amendment right of religious freedom at a place of religious worship shall be subject to the penalties of this law. That's Section 2 of the FACE Act. You heard the Attorney General of Minnesota, 1, defend the protesters' rights to storm into this church, and 2, deny that the FACE Act applied when Section 2 of the FACE Act clearly says whoever by force or threat of force or by physical obstruction intentionally injures, intimidates, or interferes with, or attempts to injure, intimidate, or interfere with any person exercising their First Amendment right of religious freedom at a place of religious worship shall be subject to the penalties of this law. They don't think that they are. And Don Lemon, by the way, now is possibly going to get himself charged with a hate crime because he went on that obnoxious woman, that very angular, awful woman. What's her name? I can't remember. She's all the rage these days with progressives. And let's just listen to this.
And there's a certain degree of entitlement. I think people who are, in the religious groups like that, it's not the type of Christianity that I practice, but I think that they're entitled, and that entitlement comes from a supremacy, a white supremacy. And they think that this country was built for them, that it is a Christian country, when actually we left England because we wanted religious freedom. It's religious freedom, but only if you're a Christian and only if you're a white male, pretty much. And so, yeah, I absolutely 100%, but it's an intimidation tactic. And, I said, I don't understand how I've become the face of it when I was a journalist. I do understand that I'm the biggest name there. And I'm also, as I was on with my producers this morning, you and Kylie talk all the time. My producers were saying, I said, how did I become the face of this? And my producer said, Don, you're a gay black man in America.
Yeah, that's right, Don. It's because you were a gay black man in America, not because you stormed in with the protesters after coordinating with them in advance, and then go on to say these people were white supremacists because they were worshiping God on Sunday. In, by the way, a multiracial denominational church. The stunning arrogance of these people. But it gets better. I got to play you this audio. This is from CNN. This is a CNN legal analyst who was on the Struggle Sessions show with Abby Phillips. And she's explaining to them how this is a clear-cut violation of federal law. And the progressive activist next to her couldn't get that through her head. Just listen to this.
And Stacey Schneider joins the table. And Stacey, let me start with you, counselor. What does the law say about protesting in a church like this?
Yeah, the law says that these protesters are in trouble. There's a federal statute called FACE, F-A-C-E, that says if you interfere or physically obstruct another person's First Amendment right to exercise their freedom of practicing their religion, it is a federal crime. Now, had these protesters stood outside the church, been on the sidewalk, been on the street, they likely would have been protected by their First Amendment right to protest. But you're allowed to protest in a public forum, but that right is not absolute. They crossed the line when they went inside a church. And I think of it almost like, a church is public property. Imagine if protesters went inside a hospital to protest Medicaid or health policy and interrupted treatment of patients. It's really not that different.
But ICE officers do that.
Here it is.
ICE officers have been going into hospitals. They have been going into churches. Donald Trump said they were allowed to go into churches. They're going to schools. They're picking out parents from drive-by lines. And these people in the neighborhood just found out that their pastor of the church is a high-ranking ICE official. So I think if you're a church that has an ICE person as a pastor, it's already political, and he's running the church. Like, at the end of the day, I don't think this has... I know, but I don't think this has anything to do with faith, and I think that the community is making it a faith issue. I think this is about politics and power. Well, it does have to do with faith, and I'll tell you what. It was inside a church, and religious practice was going on inside the church. They basically allegedly stormed into the church, interrupted it, disrupted it, physically blockaded it. And not only is a federal law possibly involved, and I don't think the state is going to pursue this, but they could be found guilty of a trespass.
Notice how the progressive activist, she can't wrap her head around this. She simply can't fathom that they broke the law. If ICE can go into houses and hospitals, why can't protesters? Because ICE are federal agents and protesters aren't. This is not hard. When did you people get stupid? She's just trying to explain the law, and the progressive activist cannot fathom how this is possible. And by the way, to the lawyer's point, when the Attorney General of Minnesota is saying these protesters should go into churches and disrupt them, how can Christians in Minnesota think the law is going to protect them? The feds are going to have to protect them. Even this prosecutor, this lawyer acknowledges the state's probably not going to prosecute even the trespass. Tim Walz, Jacob Fry, the Attorney General, they're not going to punish the protesters for storming into a church, trespassing, and disrupt church services. That's how far left the left has gotten these days. If you are a Christian who disagrees with far left ideology, your church can be shut down by protesters. We should be focused, all of us, on this. Instead, the president's insanity on Greenland is going to get all the coverage. And that's not my fault. That's his fault. And you should all take note of that. Look, I don't know this woman's name. I don't keep up with these people. She's become all the rage. She's this horse-faced, I'm going to call her Mr. Ed. And she's interviewing Don Lemon. And Mr. Ed, listen to Mr. Ed discussing this church in Minnesota.
Well, I can certainly understand their frustration with that, because all of the grifting through Christianity and overt patriotism, and then these people can't call out the Jeffrey Epstein pedophilia ring. It's very alarming.
That's Newsbusters captured that clip. That's the white angular, kind of looks like Mr. Ed, very white horse face. And she says that the people, they won't call out Jeffrey Epstein. Where does this woman come from? These people were in a church. You're so political, lady. You think that Christians in church are political? That's genuinely an insane view, that Christians should be talking about Jeffrey Epstein instead of Jesus Christ in church. How demented are you? And look, with these demented people out there, you kind of sometimes need protection from these crazy people, and a lot of them can get your data online. Mine was purchased by progressive activists online, which is why I needed a group like Incogni to help me find all my information with the data brokers and get the data brokers to take down my information. One of the data brokers even had pictures of my kids that were tied to me based on geolocation stuff. Incogni helps take your personal data off the internet. INCOGNI is how you spell the company. INCOGNI. Right now, if you go to incogni.com/Eric, remember it's ERICK, you can get 60% off their regular price. Incogni.com/Eric. It works quietly in the background to wipe your personal data from people's search sites, from data brokers, from hidden databases, and they're persistent in doing so. Having been doxxed, having been swatted, I needed Incogni in my life. You can have them as well. INCOGNI, incogni.com/Eric. Go help them clean your stuff off the internet today. Hello and welcome. It's Eric Erickson across the nation. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I would be very happy to have you. I tread somewhat carefully here because I understand the sensitivities of some of you, but I got to tell you, let me actually, you know what, before I tell you, let me just let me break down for you, why does the president want Greenland? I actually agree with Donald Trump completely on the need for Greenland. We've actually wound down our military presence in Greenland, and a lot of people keep getting confused on this. We did it with the Danes, who wanted us to wind down after the Cold War. We wanted to do it. Bill Clinton agreed to begin the wind down back in the day. We don't have as much presence as we do there. The Russians have a massive land-based intercontinental ballistic missile system. They don't just have submarines and ships. The Russians have because Russia is the largest country on the planet. And they have a massive system of land-based intercontinental ballistic nuclear missiles to fire at other nations, including us. And based on the location of those missile silos, to get to the United States, they would fly over Greenland. Something in the order of 90% of all intercontinental ballistic missiles that are land-based in Russia fired at the United States would sail over Greenland. Not just them, but a significant portion of the Chinese land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles would also go sailing over Greenland to get to us. There's strategic importance to Greenland, whether you like it or not. It actually, the way missiles fly from Western China in the desert where a lot of their missile silos are to the United States, they would come sailing right over Greenland to New York, Washington, D.C. You want to protect the eastern seaboard from a nuclear strike from Russia or China that is land-based, you got to have a massive missile defense system on Greenland. Because all the missiles would come straight over. Not only that, Greenland has massive rare earth mineral deposits. As the Chinese are blocking our access, it makes massive strategic sense to get the rare earth minerals out of Greenland. Greenland does not have a massive population. In fact, the suicide rates in Greenland are pretty high. There's a lot of despair, a lot of fishing communities there. The control of the Arctic is also pretty key because the Russians and the Chinese are trying to control Arctic territory together, working in tandem. And we need to be able to maintain control of the Arctic, not just for oil and minerals, but also for strategic purposes. Greenland makes a ton of sense. I cannot express to you, however, how insane it is that the president has not only suggested we could militarily invade Greenland, but is bullying our allies. There is a concerted online effort. Notably, it started with Russian propagandists, and I'm not making that up. Don't tune out because I said Russian propagandists. Remember, there was that Canadian PR firm that was hiring a bunch of social media influencers in the United States. One of the things the Russians have been pushing is how bad and woke the European elite are in Western Europe. And by the way, the Western elite, they are pretty woke. They are pretty left. They are pretty socialist, but they're also still our allies. And they tend to be our biggest trading partner. A lot of Americans live in Europe. We have American military presence in Europe. They tend to have our backs. Remember, the only time NATO Article 5 was ever deployed was on 9/11. Our NATO allies had our back. The Danes have been on the battlefield with us since World War II, per capita dying with us more than almost any one of our other allies. And the Danes own Greenland. And the president has become unglued over Greenland. This is like mental illness stuff with the president on this. We should be talking about Minnesota. We should be talking about progressive overreach in this country. And yet it is the president of the United States, as he does, driving the news cycle in profoundly negative ways. So much so that you've got a lot of Republicans wondering, what did I get into? And this is the danger of having a term-limited president. He no longer has accountability. He doesn't care. He's never before the voters again. He doesn't have to think about this stuff, and he's never cared about the Republicans in Congress the way some of you think he does. And so he's going nuts over Greenland. Of all the places to go nuts over, this is the President of the United States.
What do you plan to say to European leaders in Davos when they push back on your Greenland plan?
Well,
I don't think they're going to push back too much. Look, we have to have it. They have to have this done. They can't protect it. Denmark, they're wonderful people. And I know the leaders are very good people, but they don't even go there. And, you know, because the boat went there 500 years ago and then left, that doesn't give you title to property. So we'll be talking about it with the various people. We've had tremendous success, and I've done more for NATO than anybody else. I don't think you'd have NATO right now. I got them to go 5% and pay as opposed to 2% and not pay. I've done more than any other American president for NATO by far. And we'll see how that goes. But Greenland is very important.
What are we doing here? He's right. Greenland is very important. But because a boat went there 500 years ago, we've signed treaties with Denmark. We've recognized their territorial claim. The people of Greenland have voted to stay with Denmark. This year, the people of Greenland voted to stay with Denmark. He's absolutely right on his strategic importance. And he's now alienated our European allies from wanting to help us. We could have engaged them to upgrade our military capacity in Greenland. Instead, the president decided he wants it. And here's, by the way, side point. Here's why we don't need to control Greenland, because if we controlled Greenland, Judge Boasberg would immediately join our efforts to extract the rare earth minerals using environmental regulations of the United States. The American environmental regulations have stymied our ability to get our own rare earth minerals. If we own Greenland, those laws would apply to Greenland. Let the Danes own it, and let's get the rare earth minerals. This is one of the Danish commanders was interviewed by CNN. He had served with Americans in Afghanistan. The Danes were one of the last countries to leave Afghanistan with our withdrawal. Listen to this.
Gun store owners we've spoken with say they're not seeing a spike in sales, but purchases of camping stoves, gasoline, freeze-dried food is going up, driven, they say, by the crazy language President Trump is using and concerns that events here really are out of their control. Now, Denmark's move to have NATO allies trained for Arctic security has further angered President Trump, who is threatening tariffs on the contributing countries. Compared to other NATO partners, how tough are the conditions up here?
It is very, very tough. And that's also why we have to train up here.
The Danish commander in charge tiptoes around the politics of it all. As a NATO commander, are you personally surprised that a NATO partner could be threatening another NATO partner?
I will not go into politics, but I work perfectly together with the U.S. military. We have done that for decades in Bosnia, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and we do it also today.
As a Dane who suffered a lot of losses in Afghanistan, as many per capita as the United States, is it disappointing to you that we're in this position?
Frankly, it is.
By the way, that reporter was right. Per capita, they lost as many people in Afghanistan as we did. Why are we doing this? I would prefer to talk about Minnesota. Some of you, I'm sure, are mad at me for not continuing to talk about Minnesota. But this is the big global news story of the day. And it's not just disrupting our partnerships abroad. It's also spiking mortgage rates. The 30-year bond hit almost 5% today. Why? Economic instability related to this. They think that there's a tariff war coming. The markets are down today because of all of this and the imposition of tariffs. By the way, Scott Bessent believes that we're still going to get a European deal with or without this whole thing. It's just wild. And now you got Emmanuel Macron suggesting the Europeans should invite in the Chinese to partner with them.
We must act on imports as well regarding this protection issue. And in the context of escalating trade tensions and Asian overcapacities, Europe must strengthen its trade defense instruments, including mirror measures to enforce regulatory standards, and we must improve the quality and added value of foreign direct investments, targeting projects with strong export potential. And this is core for the rebalancing with China.
A rebalancing with China. Man, we had horse-faced Mr. Ed Lady earlier. Now we got Pepe Le Pew here with Emmanuel Macron, but he wants to re-engage with China. The Canadians just did. Let me. I want to pull back the curtain with you. I want to pull back the curtain. The president lacks impulse control, and so he's kind of gone off this deep end over Greenland. His text messages with the Norwegian prime minister, it really was crazy. I put it in my morning email. If you're a subscriber, you can text Eric to 33777. You can see it. He said to the Norwegians, basically, because you didn't give me the Nobel Peace Prize, I decided I'm not all about peace anymore, and I'm going after Greenland. Let me just read you. So none of you get mad at me and claim I'm mischaracterizing. Let me read you the president of the United States in his own words, and it wasn't AI, it wasn't fake. It was him. He admits it. Dear Jonas, that's the prime minister of Norway, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although it will always be predominant, but can now think about what is good and proper for the United States of America. Denmark cannot protect that land from Russia or China, and why do they have a right of ownership anyway? There are no written documents. It's only that a boat landed there hundreds of years ago, but we had boats landing there also. The world is not secure until we have complete and total control of Greenland. Thank you. Y'all know if a Democrat said that, y'all would be asking for a mental health well check. But it was Donald Trump who did that. This is about impulse control and legacy. He wants to expand the territory of the United States, which is understandable. But you're asking, why aren't people in the White House reining him in? This is very simple. The vice president's team and a lot of those who have surrounded the president from the vice president, they're isolationists. J.D. Vance wants NATO broken up. J.D. Vance wants us out of Europe. J.D. Vance wants our troops out of Europe. J.D. Vance does not want to be actively engaged on the world stage. And a lot of those around Vance have this idea that the U.S. is in decline, but they can't say so publicly. But what they want to do is retreat from the world and reinforce the Western Hemisphere. You may agree with them, you may not, but you can't tell Canada not to deal with China or Mexico for that matter. They're not going to be bullied by us in the way you think you can bully them. So this wall off us from the world thing, it's not actually going to work, but these people are convinced it is. And so they find the president's insanity over Greenland useful because it breaks up NATO, it gets the Europeans to turn against us, and it forces our isolation, whether you want to be isolated from the world or not. This is what will happen. We will be isolated from the world. And they will get what they wanted through a back door, a much more disruptive process. But the ends justify the means in their mind. And the ends are an isolationist America retreating from the world stage, focused on the Western Hemisphere. Russia and China can sort out the rest of the world with Europe. It's a terrible policy, and it puts us in a diminished capacity in the world that will drive up your prices. You don't believe me? Look at the bond yield today. It's almost 5%. That's going to have a direct impact on mortgage rates. When you people want cheaper houses, the mortgages are going to get more expensive. Inflation will go up. Trade will go down. It will cost us if this bears out. I'm hoping that they can get behind closed doors today and come to terms and say, you know what, we'll allow you your strategic interest in Greenland, but we're not going to give you the island. That's a great scenario for us. We can get the rare earth minerals. We can get our military there. We calm the markets. We calm the bond market. We don't have to put specific welfare investment into Greenland, which we would do if we own them. So it's a win-win deal for all of us. I hope we get there. And then we can go back to talking about Minnesota. I find the president's obsession just kind of crazy in the way this is playing out. He's absolutely right about the strategic interests of Greenland. He absolutely is right. But the Europeans don't want to be bullied by him, and they're going to stand up to him, and this isn't going to end well for any of us. This hour of the program brought to you by Van Allen Golf, makers of fine golf equipment and my putter, and it's glorious. And if you know anyone into golf, I've become a golf nut. I admit it. You will love this putter that they have made. It's got a brass head. It's actually you can put on, I think, carbon steel to make it light. The brass one, the weight is perfect. Y'all, VanAllenGolf.com is website. Check them out on Instagram as well at Van Allen Golf, ALLEN, VanAllenGolf.com. Text golf to 33777 for more info. Let me jump to the phones here. Let's head to Oklahoma first to Ryan. Welcome to the show. Ryan, how are you?
Doing well, Eric. How are you, sir?
Great. What's going on?
Oh, you were talking about NATO and you're talking about Greenland. Why did Trump not, in the beginning, get with NATO and say, hey, guys, we all have an interest here. We all are friends with Greenland. Let's do this together. You know what I mean? And now he's made he's created this fight. And I agree. It's so silly. I mean, if you'd have heard...
I gotta think that, in fact, I was just texting a listener that, this isn't the New York real estate market. He may think this is part of the deal, but he could literally get exactly what he wanted without making everybody mad. Because, by the way, the Danes have already said the Chinese-Russian missile threat over Greenland and control of the Arctic is a big deal. So they're in sync with Trump, and so there was no reason to pick this fight, except you got to remember a lot of the advisors around the president want to kill off NATO. The president chose not to, and this is a backdoor way of killing off NATO, and they're just using the president and his actions. Very interesting here. You know who's not participated in any of the conversations and has not done any TV appearances on this? Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio has not done anything. There's also the Chagos Islands that the president walked back on, and good for the president on this. Don't say I criticize the president all the time. This is good for the president. The British want to hand Diego Garcia, our Navy base in the Indian Ocean. They want to hand it to the Chinese. The president come into office, originally agreed. Now that he's thought about it, he realizes it's a bad idea. He's walked back on this and says no dice. And good for the president for changing his mind. The Chagos Islands, handing them out. The British far-left government, they're embarrassed by being British. They have no pride in Great Britain. They want to hand this stuff to the communist Chinese. And President Trump is refusing to go along with it. Good for him on that front. Now, I got to tell you about Swiss America. Have you seen what gold prices are doing today? In fact, I had CNBC on in the office. They're talking about gold prices are skyrocketing because of this turmoil with Europe. Swiss American can help you if you're interested in precious metals. They're one of the nation's leaders. I buy my precious metals. I've got gold coins. I got a gold bar somewhere around here. And Swiss American can help you, and they can get you their secret war on cash report as well. 800-289-2646 is the number. 800-289-2646. Call Swiss America. Tell America sent you. They can get you their report, The Secret War on Cash, completely for free. Also, you can text them my name, Eric, to 800-289-2646. 800-289-2646. Get The Secret War on Cash report completely free. Also, SwissAmerica.com/Eric. Message and data rates may apply. Swiss America can take care of you.